Designing towers in tower defense games is one of the most fun parts of the process for me.
Yeah.
I love coming up with their abilities and upgrades, and I can get really carried away with planning way more than I need, as was definitely the case with this game. But over the course of my design process, I gradually narrowed it down to 9 fruit that I would use for my game. Today, I'm going to tell you about the first 3, so that I won't give away any spoilers. I'll walk you through how I came up with the idea, how I balanced the tower, and I'll even show you a little bit of how I actually programmed them in the Godot Game Engine. Hey everybody, I'm Edge, and welcome to the Fruit Defense devlog. Let's dive in. In his book, Level Up, the great game design author Scott Rogers said, "Form follows function." By this, he meant that when designing a character in your game, think about what it's going to do before you create it. Before you start coming up with the awesome fire-spewing dragon sword fighter enemy, why don't you think about how it's going to fit in with the rest of the enemies in your game? When I was planning the fruit for fruit defense, I thought about what role they were going to take in the game. I knew, for example, that I needed a fruit that would do splash damage, a fruit that was really good against flying enemies, and I needed multiple fruit that would be able to damage metallic enemies like soda cans. When I was writing the game design document for this game, I classified each fruit by its overall role, to make sure that I had all the different kinds of fruit that I needed. I classified the apple as a basic tower, since it was a standard tower with no special abilities. I classified the banana as a bomb tower because it dealt splash damage. And I decided the lime was a 360-degree spray tower that had acidic attacks, since it attacked all the fruit around itself and could damage metallic enemies. Once I had a general idea for what a fruit would do, I would estimate its stats using a 1 to 10 scale. For example, the apple, because it was the most basic tower, had a 5 out of 10 damage stat, but the banana had a 7 out of 10 damage stat. But since I am by no means a game design genius, several of these stat estimates were very different from what I actually ended up having in the game. After I tested and balanced the towers, the banana actually ended up dealing the same exact amount of damage per hit as the apple, which I really did not expect. An important thing to remember when making games is that most things aren't set in stone. In order to make a game as good as you can, you should constantly be changing properties and parameters to help balance a game. You definitely don't need to stick with the original plan. You might even end up coming up with something even better in the process. You never know. After I planned out the fruit, I actually needed to build them in the Godot Game Engine. Let me tell you a little bit about how I did that. The first fruit that I made was the apple. My plan was to write one fruit script in Godot and have all the other fruit inherit from that script. I made several exported variables for the stats I could set to make it really easy to change properties. In the script, I created a few empty functions that I could replace with unique code in each fruit. This is how I implemented the upgrade system. When I started to create the fruit, the first thing I would do is draw it. I would find some reference images online and use my pixel art editor to make a sprite sheet for the fruit. I would have the sprite sheet arranged with each upgrade having a column, and with the projectiles at the bottom. Once I put the sprite sheet in Godot, the script I programmed would automatically switch which column of the sprite sheet was used based on the upgrade that the fruit had. After I put the artwork in Godot, I would program and set up the fruit. The apple was probably the one that took me the longest to make, since I had to set it up from scratch. But each fruit that I made after that was much easier. When I animated the apple, I gave it an idle animation, where it would bob up and down, and I quickly scaled the sprite for an attack animation. After I tested it on the candy for a while, and made sure I had the properties balanced to perfection, I started working on the next fruit. The banana has one of my favorite attack animations of any fruit I made. It launches the banana out of the peel, which explodes on impact. For this fruit, I was able to reuse a lot of the code from the apple, but I had to set up a new projectile behavior for the arcing and exploding banana bombs. I just made the sprite for the banana move up and then move back down, while the projectile moved in a straight line towards the target. Balancing this fruit took a while because of the splash damage, but I ended up making it so that it would deal the same amount of damage as the apple, but would shoot slightly slower. It could hit 3 different enemies with each attack. The way that this worked out was that since the banana doesn't usually hit 3 candies at once, it would be really good against tightly packed enemies, but the apple is much better on spread apart enemies. This helps to balance out the game and make it so that neither fruit is more powerful than the other. One interesting problem that I had with the artwork for the banana was making it shoot while wearing a hat. I ended up having to make the hat tip to the side whenever it fired, which I think is a pretty good solution. The third fruit that I made was the lime. It was the last fruit that the player unlocked in the first world. When designing the game, I wanted there to be a few different kinds of resistances that the candy would have to different fruit, since that would force the player to use a varied strategy to beat the levels. I decided to make metal enemies like soda cans that would be immune to everything but acidic attacks. The lime was the first fruit that the player got that could hit these metal enemies. The lime was an interesting one to set up, since I wanted to attack in a 360-degree circle. I had to program a unique firing and aiming behavior for it, replacing some of the default fruit code that I created with the apple. When I was balancing the lime, I made it shoot slower than the apple and deal less damage to regular candy. But because it fired so many projectiles, if it was positioned well, it could deal more damage than the apple per attack. The lime is a powerful fruit, but only if used well, which is one of the things that I like about it, and it's something that I want to try and make for all the towers in the tower defense game. I hope you enjoyed watching this video, and maybe even learned a little something about designing tower defense games. I'm definitely not done with developing fruit defense yet, but hopefully I'll be finished by January and have the game ready for all of you to play. That's it for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Testing 1, 2. Does this work? I am talking about fruit defense.